Rory McIlroy has now endured 10 years of close calls and near misses at major championships, and it's changed our perception of him. It can make it tough to remember the moments when he was the most feared man on the course.
What finish for McIlroy!
Moments like the 2014 PGA Championship at Valhalla Golf Club. He's still a great player today, obviously, but at that moment in time, he was a killer. A few weeks earlier, he had won his third major championship at the Open in Royal Liverpool.
The winner of the gold medal and the champion golfer of the year is Rory McIlroy.
Just 1 week earlier, he had captured the WGC Bridgestone by crushing Sergio Garcia on Sunday.
Rory McIlroy at his brilliant best again.
He was world number one, and here at Valhalla, he took a one-shot lead into the final round. Graham McDowell made a TV appearance that afternoon, and what he said about Rory gives the best sense of what people were thinking then. He said, quote, "It's beginning to look a little Tiger-esque. I said to the boys at the Open, I didn't think we were going to see the new Tiger era. I'm not eating my words, but I'm certainly starting to chew on them." End quote. Rain in the early afternoon delayed the tee times. The weather in the Ohio River Valley turned unbearably humid. And though almost everyone there that day could have predicted that Rory would win the tournament, nobody could have known how bizarre it would be, or that the strangest moment of all would come in near darkness on the 18th hole. The leaders finally teed off that Sunday at 4:19 p.m., but Rory started slowly. He made a bogey at 3 and again at 6. That let 3 players catch up: Henrik Stenson, Rickie Fowler, and Phil Mickleson. Fowler made birdie on 5 to actually pass Rory, and for Fowler it was his first ever lead on Sunday at a major. But the pace of play was absurdly slow, and on the 6th tee, Rory and his partner Bernd Wiesberger caught up to Phil and Rickie, and both pairs had to wait. Wiesberger made polite conversation with them, but Rory sat off by himself, seething, refusing to engage, just glaring ahead, not saying a word. Part of his anger in that moment was his own play, but another part, which he admitted to David Feherty a couple years later, was that he didn't like how Phil and Rickie were fist-bumping and high-fiving, and basically acting like teammates instead of players competing against each other for a major. It annoyed him, and he vowed to catch them and beat them. The tide began to turn for him on the par 5 10th when he tried to hit a draw for his second shot, pulled it way left, but somehow put a fade on the ball and wound up on the green in one of the accidentally great shots of the entire year. He made the eagle putt, and that put him one shot back of Fowler and Mickleson. The charge was on, and from there, things happened fast. 2 more birdies on 13 and 17 and some rough pressure play from his opponents put him 2 shots ahead of both Phil and Rickie heading to 18. And none of that was a surprise. Back then, it was just Rory being Rory. The 18th hole at Valhalla is an uphill par 5 that runs alongside Brush Run Creek, and there's a stone terrace pond that attracts wayward drives on the right, and the green is guarded by 2 bunkers, a big front bunker and a pot bunker to the left. Darkness had fallen on the course by then. It was almost 8:30 at night.
How would you like to try and win a major in that?
And as he came to the last tee, Rory desperately wanted to finish the round without delay. Undoubtedly, CBS wanted the same thing, and Rory knew that if he hit his drive, then they'd have to let him finish the hole if he wanted. Problem was, Rickie and Phil had just teed off and were only just walking away from the tee when the last group arrived. That's when Rory rushed up to Fowler and after a short conversation said to him, "We want to hit now." Grantland's Brian Curtis on the scene described Fowler's face as confused and semi-cowed. He asked Rory if he should tell Phil, and as he left to do so, the sound of thunder could be heard in the sky. The weather was coming back. Phil agreed to let Rory tee off.
They should just do it now.
But in the haste and confusion, Rory came within a hair's breadth of sending his drive into the creek on the right side. It was David Feherty up ahead who conveyed the message that he was safe, just barely. Fowler and Mickleson hit their second shots then, both of them under the impression that they would probably need to make eagle to have a chance to tie Rory. But as they began their uphill walk to the green, Rory threw out his arms in a gesture of protest. He asked if he could play up, but either they didn't hear him or they ignored him, and they kept walking. That's when Rory appealed to an official, who finally agreed to let him hit up. When that message was conveyed to Mickleson, he had a heated argument with another official.
I'm not sure Phil is exactly thrilled about the way this is playing out at the 18th.
He was fine allowing them to tee off as a courtesy, but this, to him, was unprecedented. And there are a few reasons why this was a big deal. First, everybody else had been forced to wait all day. But as Fowler pointed out later, because of this ruling, Rory would never have to get out of rhythm. He'd have the luxury of just walking up to his tee shot and hitting rather than waiting the 10 minutes it might take for Phil and Rickie to finish on the green. Second, either Phil or Rickie could theoretically make eagle, and that would put pressure on Rory's approach shot. But even if he only had to watch Phil make a birdie, which is what eventually happened, it would still add pressure because it would force him to make a par. By hitting up before they finished the hole, he found a way around those nerves. Third, it was already very dark, and it would have been even darker if Rory and Bernd Wiesberger had to wait to hit their approach shots. Hence, it would be much more difficult. Both Mickleson and Fowler were diplomatic after the fact with the media, but it was obvious, blatantly obvious in Phil's case, that they weren't happy. The entire scene and everything that happened seemed to be a case of Rory's tremendous willpower asserting itself. Like he almost gave the officials no choice. They could have said no, and some people assert that it shouldn't have been up to them at all, but the sheer force of Rory's personality was such that he got his way. He didn't want to hit in darkness, he didn't want to come back the next day, and one way to look at this is that nobody was strong enough to match his energy and say no. The great irony, though, is that Rory's general sense of hurry was doing him no favors. He hit his approach into the difficult front bunker, and Mickleson almost holed his eagle pitch. His tap-in birdie got him to within one shot of Rory, while Fowler could only make par. And from the bunker, Rory had very few good options. He was forced to pitch out to 34 feet, and with rain starting to fall again and wind whipping the flags above the scoreboard, he faced a difficult two-putt to win the championship. Nevertheless, this was vintage Rory, and it could only end one way. His birdie putt stopped 10 inches from the hole, and when he tapped in,
And we have a shining star at sunset.
the world's #1 golfer had won his 4th major and was the undisputed king of his generation. He came through under the gun by virtue of great skill, great pressure play too, but perhaps most importantly, an extra dash of insistence at the very end. And you would have sworn that night, as darkness fell in Kentucky, that he'd win many more.